Wars have rules, and they must be upheld.
Wow, I'm Huples Cat. Welcome to the third and probably final video in my series on Gaza, because it's being suppressed really dramatically. This one is the most fun if you like, this one is kind of speculative. I'm going to look at what happens in the near certainty that Israel occupies northern and possibly southern Gaza, like they already occupied the West Bank, and then I'm going to hopefully introduce the insane idea that this could be the start of World War III.
Уважаемый Владимир Владимирович, ассаламу алейкум.
Alaikum assalam.
Putin is many things, but in truth his country has a large minority of Muslims. 9% to 10% of Russians are Muslim. Of course, it's probably in his geopolitical interest to have the world dislike America and to blunt the West's attempts to reinforce Ukraine.
Что касается мечетей, храмов, синагог и так далее, Досанов, у нас в новейшее российское время построено столько подобных учреждений, которые столько, сколько никогда в советское время не строилось. Мечети построены тысячи. 8 тысяч, да. 8 тысяч мечетей по всей стране. Честно говоря, когда я вот со своими друзьями и коллегами разговариваю, там, скажем, из арабских стран, они даже вот не верят. Сколько? Когда я говорю, тысячи, там, 8 тысяч. Они даже не верят этим цифрам. Ну, верят, конечно, когда я говорю, но в целом это выглядит...
When you have a population of 147 million and nearly 14 million of them are Muslim, you really don't want to upset those people, especially after Chechnya and a few other things that have been going on in the pretty recent past in Russia. So if peace doesn't break out and a ceasefire doesn't happen and Israel occupies northern and possibly southern Gaza, what next?
Depending on who you ask, it's a wall, or a fence, or a barrier. And depending on where you stand, it's either a necessary eyesore that protects the Jewish state, or it's a separation wall, built to enforce an unequal system that allows one side to flourish while the other stagnates.
So they're going to build a big wall probably like they have around the West Bank, and they're going to create a sterile zone like they have around the West Bank. This time around they wanted a 2-kilometer sterile zone, and they wanted to use Egyptian territory for that. That's pretty ballsy of them, stealing Egyptian land so they can steal Palestinian land. Which of course is okay, I guess, if it makes them safer. We already know there'll be continual uprisings, there'll be continual deaths, there'll be continual terrorism. It won't end anything. Occupying Gaza, expelling the Gazans out of what remains of Palestine, will not provide peace. However brutal the attack is, however methodical it is in rooting out Hamas, you can't stop a people who've been occupied not wishing to be occupied.
بس بنحكي انه لا عداله تحت الاحتلال، بس لا عداله تحت الاحتلال، واحنا بنحكم غير شرعي.
اعتقالي واعتقال باسم واعتقال باسم، بعدين قرار هدم البيت، بعدين إصابتي، بعدين استشهاد مصطفى، استشهاد خالها قدامها ومصطفى عمها قدامها. كل هذا اللي عاشته عاه.
Of course, we in the West will keep nodding our heads as long as the death toll isn't in the thousands. It appears that we're okay with death tolls in the hundreds of Palestinians every year, but when it reaches several thousand and we see pictures of the kids, then we care. Until there is an actual free Palestine, like the United Nations wants, I don't think you're going to get peace in the Middle East. Israel's going to argue that a free Palestine, they've tried it. They really haven't. They really, really haven't. But it'd be worth trying it using the United Nations forces, mostly Arabic, to police it. But that's not the way we're going, is it? Do you support American troops occupying Gaza to provide peace?
This was a, I guess, trial balloon that has been floated and leaked out, where there is some plan that is currently being discussed, at least at a pretty high level, between the United States, Israel, and the rest of the world, where they are weighing peacekeepers for the Gaza Strip after Hamas is destroyed in this, in this hypothetical world. Well, these multinational forces would include American, UK, and French troops, aka NATO, and another option would, quote, put Gaza under the United Nations oversight. And again, this is a joint possibility that is being discussed at the highest level of the United States and in Israel to put American forces on the ground in Gaza as peacekeepers. So I can first of all just say hell no to that. This is Israel's problem. Israel breaks it. They can buy it and they can occupy it for as long as they want, take all the attenuated casualties, because we don't need anything to hell to do with this.
Gaza is emptied. That's ethnic cleansing. It's a war crime, and we should hold a new Nuremberg trial for it. We won't. And then Israeli settlers move into what remains of Gaza and start using it for their own use. The problem will then be that you will have an awful lot of very, very unhappy Palestinians just over the border and in countries all around you who are going to probably plot terror. Now, Egypt's clearly said no to ethnic cleansing, so if Israel actively pushes out Palestinians out of Palestine and pushes them into Egypt, Egypt could see that as an act of war by Israel. It's highly unlikely Egypt's going to attack Israel given the state of its weaponry. But again, it's going to cause a lot of anger towards Israel from the rest of the Arabic countries. So about 25% of the globe is Muslim, 1.91 billion people. How are they going to react to the occupation and or ethnic cleansing of Gaza? Well, I think we can guess they won't be very happy. Some of them won't care. Most of them are going to see it as an attack on themselves. Already Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Starbucks, and probably next American cars and products like Apple are suffering from an extremely aggressive boycott that's going on in Arabic nations. And it's effective. It's almost 100% solid. Will it continue onwards? Probably not. If they level Gaza and occupy it and ethnically cleanse it, probably.
You are the minister of happiness, and the smile's back on your face, and that's all that counts. You seem very happy with the win.
I am very happy with the win, but I haven't been very happy lately, to be honest with you. The situation in the world doesn't make me happy, so I feel like I'm sorry.
It's okay. These are the moments. These are the moments, Ons, that can take us away from the world for a few minutes, where we can focus on sports, we can focus on the people we love, and it can take us away from the problems for a few minutes. So you're able to let all of us do that as your fans, and we appreciate everything you do out on this tennis court very much.
I mean, I wish just...
Hans, we share in your sentiment. You know, we had a moment of silence when the tournament started to pray for peace and happiness. There's been hurricanes in Acapulco that's going on in the Middle East. There is a lot going on everywhere, but we want to take this moment to tell you that the sun will come out again, and we love you, and we wish you only the best.
Thank you.
Okay. Hans Jabor, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for.
Yes, well said, both Andrew Krasny.
This grief is genuine. Israeli and Palestinians right now are grieving the loss of their own identities and their own family members and their own people. This makes peace impossible, and that's exactly when we should be pushing for peace, when it is impossible. There's only one way to go, and that's up, not down. Now let's speculate. Iran, the bogeyman of America, decides to attack Israel and or the American fleet and or American bases before it is attacked by Israel and or America, or attacks back after being attacked by Israel and or America. Israel invades Lebanon. Israel invades part of Syria. Israel's going after all of these Arabs that threaten its territorial integrity. The truth is the Israeli Defense Force should be able to handle them all, actually. There's no way Iran can move its larger army into Israel without being destroyed by air or by sea. They could swamp one of the American or both of the American fleets with missiles and little small boats. They could do a whole bunch of things. They're not going to win a war, though. They could have their proxies attack selective American bases all around the Middle East and destroy the personnel inside those bases and or take them hostage. This would put the American president in a terrible position. Would America attack Iran, knowing that it would execute American hostages? Israel seems to have no issue with this. Not altogether sure an American president could sell this to the American people and get elected ever again.
Arkadaşlar, polise taş atmak ve benzeri şeyler yanlış. Öfkemiz çok büyük. Tutamıyoruz. Ama Türkiye elinden geleni yapıyor.
This peace convoy went there because this American base in Turkey is being used to supply bombs and missiles directly from America to Israel. That's why they went there. They want a ceasefire. Turkey's very, very much against, politically, Israel right now for what Israel's doing in Gaza. This wasn't a wild mob. They went there for deliberate aim, and that deliberate aim is to let their government know it cannot reduce its pressure on Israel and America. The videos from a destroyed and burning and crushed Gaza, the videos of bits of children lying around, will have more effect on more people than the videos of the Hamas attack in October on Israel. We all should see each of those attacks, each of those outcomes as appalling, and I do. After 9/11, we all believed that we were American, for a brief time until America extracted vengeance in the wrong direction. After this October attack, I've heard nobody say, we're all Israeli now. I see quite the opposite. I see many people of many faiths, including the Jewish faith, utterly appalled at the violent vengeance that Israel is trying to inflict upon the world. It's not going to end well. America has a lot of debt. A lot of it's owned by China. And both of the candidates, the frontrunners for the 2024 presidential election, are, in my opinion, deeply flawed, and both of them are deeply unfit for office. What is true is Biden's almost certainly not going to be re-elected. His actions in supporting Israel are not playing well domestically, with either faith. Is Iran a threat to America? Is Iran a threat to Israel? No, not militarily. Israel spends vastly more on weaponry than Iran does and has much better equipped troops. What Iran has is lots of proxies, lots of allies all around the area. Iran could easily launch a conventional ballistic missile stuffed with dirty bombs on Tel Aviv or on an American carrier, and that could possibly trigger a nuclear response. The big question, of course, is does Iran have nuclear weapons? It looks like they do. Is America going to fight a nuclear war against Iran if Iran attacks them? Israel will. Israel will definitely retaliate using nuclear weaponry. No question, they will. Now, Iran's been preparing for a long time to fight a conventional war with a massive attack from the air. The fact that they have a lot of these bases 500 meters down in the bedrock also implies they have thought quite seriously about having nuclear strikes on them and still being able to defend Iran. The fighters you see are modelled after the old F-4 Phantom. They're not high-tech, they're not great. You don't need a lot of high-tech. You need a lot of pilots and you need a lot of weaponry. Iran has neither of those things. Iran is not going to take control of the airspace around Iran, let alone Israel, in the event of a shooting war. The government welcomes conflict with Israel because it takes some people's minds off domestically. The Iranian government is not nice, nor is it well supported by most of its youth, and it desperately needs to stay in power because that's what people in power do. So Iran would fight.
کار می‌کند موشک‌های دوربرد بالستیک، موشک‌هایی که بر روی لانچر سوار است و آماده پرتاب و روحیه و ایمان و اعتقاد مردانی که فقط منتظر دستورند. نقطه‌ای از ایران اسلامی 500 متر زیر زمین شهری است که این گزارش بازدید فرمانده نیروی هوافضای سپاه از یکی از شهرهای موشکی این مرز و بوم است. سراسر جغرافیای ایران اسلامی و دیدار چهره به چهره با آتشفشانی در اعماق زمین که اگر فوران کند خانمان سوز است برای هر بیگانه. دار شدیم
کوه یخ شناور در آبه که قدری از اون در بیرون آبه. کمتر استان، شهر و شهرستانی داریم که حداقل یک پایگاه موشکی نداشته باشیم. آنقدر پایگاه زیاد داریم که هر مقدارم شناسایی بکنن قادر نیستن مقابله بکنن با مجموع پایگاه‌های ما. ایران قول میدم کوچکترین
So in this horrible situation, Iran's done something really bad. Israel has hit back on 4 or 5 targets using nuclear weapons. The whole area is in absolute outrage. There's far more people needing help than we can provide. Is America going to put ground troops down in Iran to try and help the Iranians who are dying from radiation poisoning? If you look at the map, Iran has neighbours. One of them is Turkmenistan, which used to be part of the former Soviet Union, which to this day retains very good relationships with the Russians. It wouldn't be too hard for Russia to enter Iran to provide aid. In fact, Iran and Russia are kind of close allies. It would be normal for Russian troops to enter Iran to help out if Iran was attacked. If Israel hits the Russian troops, if America hits the Russian troops, if Israeli or American troops are on the ground in Iran, you're looking at conflict and possible World War III. Now, one thing I've heard nobody mention is what happens if Saudi Arabia and Iran decide to work together against Israel. Now, this might sound unlikely because they have been traditionally not happy with each other and they've been different powerhouses and there's been lots of issues there and stuff like that, which we in the West have exploited to keep them apart. But a destroyed Gaza, an expulsion of Palestinians, it's going to cause the populations of both Iran and Saudi Arabia to emphatically demand of their leadership firm, violent action against Israel. Iran could cut 20% of the world's oil simply by mining the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia has got a long sea border with that area, and it also could cut off the Suez Canal outflow. Saudi could just stop producing oil for the West. That would cripple us. Iran would join in quite quickly. Kuwait is already furious at what's going on in Israel, and so is the United Arab Emirates. They're also likely to use their economic power rather than their weaponry. Not sure if the population of America and Canada and Britain are okay with paying 4 to 5 times the amount they need to at the gas pump to support Israel evicting Palestinians out of Gaza. I think we all understand that won't end the terrorism and it won't make Israel safer. Saudi Arabia has got a highly efficient, very large technological military force. They're much different from Iran. They absolutely could fight toe-to-toe with Israel. I don't think they will, but they could. More interestingly, they have a lot of American bases inside of Saudi Arabia. It's not within the bounds of possibility that they might be told that they have to shut them and leave. Of course, the threat of another 9/11, again done by mostly Saudi nationals, would be very, very high, especially if Gaza is destroyed and stolen, as the Arabs would see it, from the Arabs and given to Israel under the geist of American power. Of course, I focus on America because I live above you in Canada, but effectively, as far as the world's concerned, we're the same country. With the Middle Eastern oil supply destroyed and or shut down, what will China do? They're not going to sit back and go, oh, we'll wait it out. China doesn't do things like that. China would see it as a direct attack on China. With an extremely rare resource called fossil fuels, now hard to get globally, China might see it, much like the Japanese did in 1941, as now is the time to strike Taiwan. It's a similar situation in a lot of ways. What happens with a nasty ground war in the Middle East that America's been sucked into, followed by Taiwan invasion? Has America got the money and the political will and the troop strength to fight China and deal with an Arabic world that's fighting them unconventionally? The answer is no. China's military forces are around China, they're not divided, and they're very, very modern and they're on the way up. America's forces are scattered all around the globe and are not prepared to actually lose significant troop strength anymore. If America's losing 1,000, 3,000 sailors a day, I think that will have a much more impact on the American population than if China loses 3,000 sailors a day in a shooting war around Taiwan. Would America actually go to war with China in that situation? I don't know. I hope not. I don't know if America would win. I know a lot of people out there going, yeah, of course we would crush China, they're useless. China's changed, really changed. And with home turf advantage, I wouldn't bet on China losing. The economic effects would be absolutely catastrophic. Certainly China in a war has lots of American bases all around it that it could destroy to make a point. The truth is America is so heavily indebted to China that to wage war against China might seem like a good idea because it gets rid of the debt if America wins. But if America loses that war, China will asset strip America to get its value back, to get its debt repaid. Don't make any doubts about that. America, if it fights China, cannot lose. Now hopefully none of those things are going to happen and won't happen. Hopefully peace will break out. But what I think the outcome of Gaza in October 2023 for sure is going to be is a steep rise in unconventional warfare, or you can call it terrorism. I don't care what you call it. It means sudden out of the blue attacks that kill civilians. It's going to rise. It's going to be back to the 1970s again. It's going to be terrible. I wouldn't advise going on a Mediterranean cruise, and I definitely would be very careful about where you go on holiday. Globally, the West is a tiny minority of handful of countries around the world that don't actually accept that the state of Palestine exists. The majority of the world accepts that Palestine is a nation, and the United Nations want Palestine to have its own borders, its own army, its own police force, and its own customs. Without an independent Palestine, there will be no peace in the Middle East. The big question is, can there be an independent Israel in the Middle East and still have peace? Of course, 15 million Israelis could easily move to North America or back to Germany. That's also not going to happen. So you have two trains hitting each other. We have to pull them apart. We have to slap both of them and make them friends. Because without that, these wars were never going to end. And the death, the misery, destruction's never going to end. Each death of a child on Israel's side, each death of a child on the Palestinian side makes more violence happen. And this war has gone on for 75 years now, showing no sign of ending. It cannot be ended by the annihilation of one side or the other. That won't work. Sure, you can annihilate every Jew in Israel and destroy all of Israel, but Jews around the world and other people around the world will never forgive you for that if you do that, and will attack you and attack you and attack you. The same is also true if Palestine is annihilated. It's a zero-sum game. What shocks me is the West has actually piled in on Israel's side. It's daft to do that. You could have supported Israel without doing the extreme acceptance of the vengeance that Israel's currently inflicting. The West, as I see it, has lost any moral or ethical authority around the globe. China is happily going to fill up that vacuum and continue its ascendancy to dominant superpower status. I hope we in the West are okay with that. I am. I don't think we need to be the boss of everybody, nor do I think we have to be the world's police.
As the Secretary General stated this morning, this is a crisis of humanity. In less than a month, more than 10,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been killed. And as we speak, Palestinian civilians continue to be killed. Children are bearing the brunt. As several UN officials have stated already, Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. No one is safe. More UN aid workers and journalists have been killed in 4 weeks than in any month of a conflict in decades. If ever, Palestinian civilians are also deprived of necessities essential to their survival. We call for an urgent humanitarian ceasefire. The Secretary General just made the same call this morning, a humanitarian ceasefire now. This is desperately needed to enable full rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access, including for UN and humanitarian personnel, consistent with international humanitarian law. We urge all parties to take steps urgently towards a cessation of hostilities to ensure the protection of civilians. These must include electricity, water, fuel, food, and medical supplies sustained and at scale.
The calls for a ceasefire are very loud. The United Arab Emirates has also broken ranks with its traditional support of America and is also loudly calling for a ceasefire.
As we heard today in our briefings, civilians in Gaza cannot even find safety in UN facilities, schools, hospitals, and refugee camps. These civilian facilities have been under attack in violation of international law. It is imperative that their protective status is upheld. We condemn all violations of international humanitarian law, all violence against civilians, including all acts of terrorism and indiscriminate attacks. We condemn the 7th October attacks by Hamas on Israel. We also condemn the indiscriminate attacks by Israel on the Gaza Strip. We call on all parties to fully comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. We reiterate the need for the parties to take measures to ensure the safety and well-being of civilians and their protection, as well as humanitarian and medical personnel, UN personnel, and journalists. Wars have rules, and they must be upheld.
Even France, I think, is sort of calling for a ceasefire. Any rational person wants a ceasefire. Certainly Israel needs a ceasefire so it can figure out what it did wrong with its border security. Certainly Gaza needs a ceasefire because children are dying. And it seems hyperbolic to say that, but they're dying in extraordinary numbers and from very preventable diseases, and also, of course, from bombs. American-made bombs.
Well, the Security Council just met in consultations at the request of the United Arab Emirates and China. In the wake of Hamas terrorist attacks, the situation on the ground is deteriorating dangerously in the Gaza Strip and throughout the whole region. France is deeply concerned at the number of civilian casualties in Gaza, which stands at several thousand. It condemns the attacks on United Nations sites on humanitarian personnel. Given the gravity of the humanitarian situation and the scale of the needs of the Gaza population, France calls for an immediate humanitarian truce. This truce must be durable and sustained. It is absolutely necessary and must lead to a ceasefire.
Joe Biden's not going to win the 2024 election because of this. It's not just Arab Americans that won't vote for him. A lot of other Americans are absolutely disgusted at what America's done. You can support a friend without telling the friend you can kill him. Gazans are going to continue to die. The West Bank is going to continue to be in a state of uprise. Israel will continue to respond to any threat or any aggression with overt violence. America is going to continue to try and defend Israel, to allow Israel to do these acts. It's not going to end well. Donate to the Red Cross if you can. The need for the Red Cross is going to be huge, whether they've been pushed into the Sinai Desert or they've been allowed to stay in Israeli-controlled Gaza. To have no ceasefire is to say, no, Israel has to kill everybody they can despite the civilian casualties because that's the only way they're ever going to get rid of all the terrorists and they'll never experience another terrorist attack. If you believe that in 2023, that will work, you're out of your head. I think a lot of our leaders right now are out of their heads. Thanks for watching. That's it. Back to my normal programming. I'm really sorry that a lot of these videos won't ever get seen. The suppression is huge and it's quite noticeable in the audience figures, but I don't care. If you do watch this video and you have watched the other two in the series, you'll have more idea what's actually going on than watching Facebook or Fox News or CNN. We're in very, very dangerous times. It's fashionable to say that as a prepper because it gets clicks. It's true.
No votes, no ceasefire, no votes. No votes in Michigan, no votes in Arizona, no votes in Georgia, no votes in Nevada, no votes in Wisconsin, no votes in Pennsylvania, no votes in Ohio, no votes for you anywhere. If you do not call for a ceasefire now, we will make our voices heard more and more. In November, we remember. In November, we remember.
More precipitous than the drop since 2020. This issue resonates. It's big. It's important. It also is part of a general national trend. Arab Americans are not immune from what the rest of the culture is feeling, and that is that President Biden just is not in control of his own presidency and how he is being portrayed to the American people and to the world. They didn't elect a Reaganite foreign policy advocate, a neocon who was fighting for freedom there to have freedom here, that kind of rhetoric that comes from the White House. They voted for somebody that focus on a whole bunch of domestic issues to bring domestic peace and tranquility after 4 years of Donald Trump. And that's not what they've gotten. And I think that, coupled with the Gaza situation, most certainly is driving these negative numbers. They are deeply disappointed with the position he's taken on this conflict, and they just are jumping ship.
Stay safe, be ready, and hope this doesn't go tits up. Doodles. This has been a Tiny Terry production 2023.